There's something that's been weighing heavily on my heart for the last couple of days, and I decided to come on here and share and talk about it. There's a couple on social media, a popular couple. I think people admired them and, respected them. Didn't know about them until they broke up. And the circumstances of their breaking up, I think, combined with the world's reaction to it, there's a lot of reactions, just kind of stirred something in me and I wanted to share. So I found that I've been thinking a lot about a time in my life when I was deeply unhappy in my marriage and I wanted to leave. I remember like it was yesterday, the thought of leaving without sharing it with anyone, without having any conversations about it. I felt like I was having a heart attack. I felt like I was having a heart attack to the point where I was so worried that I went to talk to my family physician about it. And listen, I have a degree in medicine and I've practiced medicine and I couldn't tell if I was having panic attacks or if I was having a heart attack. I was investigated and my heart was fine. But I think the point is just thinking about leaving a marriage that was almost 10 years felt like I was going to die. And I remember the first time I had a conversation with a close family member, just sharing my experience of the relationship and some of the things that I had done and why I thought it was best if I left. I remember the first thing they said to me: "This will be the biggest mistake of your life." I mean, is he wrong? I remember talking to friends. I remember talking to other family members. I talked to one family member that said to me, "Don't mention this to anyone again. It's going to be a disgrace to our family." I talked to some of my friends and, they would ask, "What are you doing, bro? What are you thinking? You're going to break up your family? Your kids are going to come from a broken home? You're going to destabilize your family in this economic situation?" I believe there was only one person in my life, in my family, that I spoke to that said, "If that's something that you need to do, you go ahead and do it and I'll support you." And I truly believe that that person and their support was what gave me the courage to eventually leave. I also remember talking to one or two of my closest friends, and they just outrightly told me they don't fight with their wives. They don't bring up any issues. They just go outside of their marriage, take care of their needs, and come back home. And they said everything was great. Everything was happy. Everything was dandy. The stability of their relationships from the outside just looked great. They're still married. I think that one of the things that we don't talk very often about is, people say, if the relationship was so bad, if you were suffering so much, if your needs were not being met, why didn't you leave? And it's like, leaving doesn't really seem like that great of an option either. We live in a society where the longevity of a relationship is praised and exalted. I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever heard someone say that relationship lasted for 40 years. Did their souls thrive? Did they experience connection? Was the relationship fulfilled? As a matter of fact, many of the long-term relationships that I've come across, when the people in those relationships have had the opportunity to be honest about the relationship, it's typically a narrative of suffering and pain and discontent and deep dissatisfaction. But when we don't know the details of that, I think we celebrate it. And then we condemn those that leave. They broke up their family. They destabilized the kids. We call them selfish. We call them immoral, right? They couldn't hold up the commitments that they made. And if you're religious, especially Christian, you know that the church will not be happy with you if you choose to leave. So then you can see how, if leaving is not an option, and if staying is experienced as a silencing of yourself, then affairs begin to look like an attractive option. Because with affairs, you are potentially able to keep the family stable, don't disrupt the life of the kids, and in many situations, your partner wouldn't even notice that anything is wrong. There's people who have had affairs for years, and their relationships just seem stable from the outside. 16, 15 years, and the person on the inside never suspected. Everything felt fine. So you think, well, if I can keep things stable and get my needs met, I can feel human again. I can have validation. I can be a person outside of my responsibilities and still maintain everything stable on this side. I think affairs begin to seem and look really attractive. I think for the most part, when people have affairs, what they're really thinking is, maybe I can get my needs met without disrupting my family. And to be clear, this is not me condoning affairs or giving an excuse for them. I understand the pain. I understand the suffering that comes with it. But I think that as humans, we don't do enough in recognizing the very real struggle. It's sort of like being in between a rock and a hard place. Or maybe like being in a frying pan or the fire. I think that what an affair does is it solves the problem of keeping your family stable and temporarily curing the problem of loneliness, because it sort of pushes the problem down the road. Because I think what ends up happening is maybe the affair ends. Now you're back to the original problem of being lonely again. Or your partner finds out and you end up creating more pain and suffering than an honest breakup, like I ended up doing, would have created. I also think that affairs create a psychological fragmentation of the self, because now you have to be two people, the person who is having the affair and the person who is pretending to not have one. So the image that you're trying to protect or project and the person that you, one might say, really are, but in secret. I also think that when it comes to men and women, I think for the most part, we've been taught in different ways to keep our relationships together. But I think for men, there's a sense that you're not really allowed to complain about a relationship or to walk away from a relationship, especially when you have had kids. If I'm being honest, I kind of agree with it. You know, how do you get a woman pregnant and they have two kids for you, and then you wake up one morning and say you don't want to be in the relationship anymore? It just kind of seems unreasonable. There's a sense of responsibility that you should stay there and take care of your family, regardless of what's happening with you. And I think for the most part, when women are unhappy in a relationship, and this probably is also backed up by the evidence that I think it's about 70% of divorces are initiated by women. So I think when a woman is really unhappy in a relationship, I think there's generally an acceptance that they can complain and they can leave. I think maybe the big conversation here is that as a society, we are saying we want honesty, but we reward longevity and containment. And I think for the most part, it's a hard and confusing message for anyone who is in a relationship that they want to leave. We tend to praise people for staying in a relationship, and we tend to shame people who choose to leave. I think what I'm really trying to say is that as a society, there's a moral outrage that we have when people have affairs that I think does not really acknowledge the real struggle or difficulty of someone who's in a committed relationship and knows that they need to leave, but also know that leaving will be extremely hard. I remember when the Ashley Madison website was hacked, and the number of people, it was a website for married people who wanted to have affairs, and the number of married people that were having affairs seemed shocking to us as a society. And I think that until we get to a place where we can truly value honesty, because it's important, because it's about truth, responsibility because it matters. Because when you are in a committed relationship, and especially when you have kids, there's a responsibility there. And to value humanity, our souls that exist inside of our bodies, that have needs and wants and desires for connection. I think until we learn to value these three things, affairs would continue to be a problem that we struggle to deal with.